Stop trying to become someone, the Zen secret to true inner peace. Part of the illusion of the distance, we are born into a world of narrative. From our earliest moments, we are handed a map, a series of coordinates that suggest our lives are a linear trajectory, leading toward a predetermined destination. We are taught that we are unfinished works, sketches awaiting the final masterstroke of achievement. We internalize the myth that the me of today is merely a placeholder for the me of tomorrow, more successful, more enlightened, more secure version who has finally arrived at the summit of contentment. This is the root of the fog. We walk through our days in a state of perpetual displacement, our consciousness anchored in a future that never arrives, while our feet stumble over the treasures of the present moment we are too distracted to notice. The restlessness of the human spirit is often framed as a virtue, a sign of ambition. We call it growth, but if we are honest, we must admit that much of our forward momentum is actually a frantic retreat from the present. We are terrified of the silence. We are terrified of the possibility that if we stopped moving, if we stopped accumulating, if we stopped becoming, we would be revealed as hollow. So we fill the vessel of our lives with noise projects, acquisitions, status markers, and intellectual framework shopping, that if we pack it tight enough, the gnawing sense of not enough will be suffocated. But the emptiness persists. It is the signature of the human condition, what the ancients called dukkha. It is the itch that no amount of scratching can satisfy. The mistake, of course, is not in the scratch, but in the belief that the itch is a problem to be solved. We treat our lives as a series of math problems, assuming that if we input the right variable as the right partner, the right salary, the right home, the right mindset, the output will be happiness. Yet, the history of human existence is a graveyard of people who solved every equation they could find, only to discover that the variables were always changing, and the solution was always one step ahead. Consider the merchant, a figure who exists in every culture and every age. He spends 40 years building an empire, sacrificing his sleep, his health, and his relationships to reach a peak of security. When he finally attains it, he doesn't find the peace he was promised. Instead, he finds a new set of anxieties: the fear of losing what he has built, the restlessness of a mind that has forgotten how to be still, and the crushing realization that he has traded his actual life for the idea of a life. The monk he meets by the river, possessing nothing, smiling at the shifting current, is not a symbol of poverty, but a symbol of radical reorientation. The monk has realized that he is not the merchant of his life, he is the river itself. The fog of incompletion is not a defect in your circumstances. It is an artifact of your perspective. We are like actors who have become so immersed in our roles that we have forgotten we are the ones who put on the costumes. We act as if the script were handed to us by the universe, rather than written by our own unconscious desires. To wake up is to step off the stage, to walk into the wings, and to realize that the play is not the point. The point is the space that allows the stage to exist. We often imagine that if we could just get there to that elusive state of grace, we would finally be allowed to stop running. We believe that peace is a reward for a life well lived or a series of accomplishments achieved. But this is the fundamental trap. Peace is not a reward, it is the natural state that remains when we stop demanding that reality conform to our projections. We are trying to find our way home by walking away from the house. This illusion of distance is maintained by the mind's constant projection. The mind lives in a state of if-then. If I have this, then I will be happy. If I change this, then I will be at peace. It creates a phantom version of the future that is perpetually superior to the present. This creates a psychic friction, a constant rubbing against the grain of reality. It is a form of violence we do to our own experience, dismissing the gift of this very breath in favor of an imagined, better version of existence that is essentially a hologram. To see through this illusion is to experience a kind of death. It is the death of the future self you have been cultivating. It is the death of the hope that some future milestone will finally fix the internal sense of lack. This death can be frightening, for it leaves us with nothing but the raw, unvarnished now. But it is the most liberating death you will ever experience, for it is the only way to be born into the reality of your own existence. When you look closely at the there you are running toward, you find it is made of the same stuff as the here. It is made of thoughts, sensations, and perceptions. There is no special magic in the future. There is no enlightenment that is hidden behind a door you haven't opened yet. Everything you are seeking, the depth, the meaning, the joy is present in the fabric of this exact second. You are not waiting for an event. You are waiting for a recognition. You are waiting to see what is already in front of your eyes. This is the Great Awakening, realizing that the distance you have been trying to bridge is a mental construct. You are not separated from your life by a gap of time. You are the life itself. You are the consciousness that perceives the time, the space, and the experiences. Once this distance collapses, the seeking ends. You don't stop acting, you don't stop working, and you don't stop loving, but you do stop needing the activities to justify your existence. You begin to move with the ease of one who has finally returned home, not by traveling to a distant land, but by finally relaxing into the chair they have been sitting in all along. Part 2: The Alchemy of Presence. To shift from the mode of seeking to the mode of inhabiting is not a physical migration. It is a collapse of the perceived distance between the seeker and the sought. We believe we must travel to find peace, but peace is not a destination. Peace is the absence of the resistance to what is. It is the willingness to let the present moment be exactly as it is, without demand that it justify itself by being something else. This requires a new architecture of attention. Most of our attention is spent in the browser tabs of the mind, the constant frantic scanning for threats, opportunities, and validations. We have dozens of these tabs open. What will they think of me? How will I handle the bill next month? Why did I say that in this state? The nervous system is perpetually tilted toward the future, vibrating with the low-grade hum of survival mode. To close the tabs is not to stop thinking. It is to stop being consumed by the thinking. The practice of awareness is the process of returning the cursor to the home page. The home page is the sensation of the breath, the feeling of gravity, the sound of the wind, the texture of the air against your skin. These things have no narrative. They do not require you to be anything other than what you are. They do not ask you to prove your worth. They simply are. When you rest your attention here, the fog begins to thin. You realize that the incompleteness you felt was merely a story you were telling yourself. You are the awareness that knows the thoughts. Think about this. Can you see the thought I am incomplete? Yes. Can you see the thought I am successful? Yes. But you are not the thoughts you see. You are the space that encompasses them. The space is never incomplete. The space is never successful or unsuccessful. The space is just the space. This realization is the bedrock of the architecture of stillness. It is the sanctuary that you can enter in the middle of a crowded street, a boardroom, or a hospital waiting room. We worry that if we stop seeking, we will stagnate. We fear that the fire of our ambition will go out. But this is the lie of the ego. When you act from the foundation of already enough, you don't become passive, you become clear. You act with a precision and a grace that is impossible when you are fueled by the desperation of lack. You become like a master artisan who creates not because they need to be someone, but because the creation is the natural overflow of their being. Presence is not a state you achieve, it is a quality you bring to the ordinary. It is the alchemy of turning the mundane into the sacred simply by being entirely there. When you wash a dish, and you are fully present for the water, the soap, the texture of the ceramic, and the warmth on your hands, the task ceases to be a chore. It becomes a meditation. It becomes an act of communion with reality. Most of us spend our lives in a split-stay tour. Bodies are in the kitchen, but our minds are in a meeting. We are physically here, but mentally elsewhere. This creates a psychic dissonance, a feeling of being fractured. To be present is to bring all of yourself into the room. It is to unite your body and your mind in the act of being. When this union occurs, the feeling of not enough evaporates, because enough is found in the wholeness of your own attention. You do not need to empty your mind of all thoughts to be present. You only need to stop believing that the thoughts are the most important thing in the room. You can have thoughts about the future, thoughts about the past, and thoughts about the world and still remain present. You are the sky, and the thoughts are just clouds. The clouds can be dark and stormy or white and wispy, but they never touch the sky. The sky is always there, vast and untouched. This alchemy is available to you in every heartbeat. You do not need to go to a retreat. You do not need to buy a course, and you do not need to wait for the weekend. You have the breath, you have the senses, and you have the capacity to notice. That is all the technology you require to dismantle the fog. You are the architect of your own presence, and the blueprint is already held within your own consciousness. Part D, the geometry of the gap. Between every event that occurs in your life and your internal reaction to it, there exists a sanctuary. This is the gap. It is a tiny, silent, and infinitely expansive spaceth millisecond that occurs after the email arrives. But before you tap out a defensive reply, the heartbeat after someone cuts you off in traffic, but before you feel the surge of rage, the pause between a negative thought arising in your mind and your decision to believe it. Most of us live our lives as if the gap does not exist. We are trained to react. We are conditioned to be mirrors that immediately reflect whatever the world throws at us. If the world is angry, we become angry. If the world is rushed, we become rushed. If the world says you aren't enough, we instantly internalize it as a fact. This is the life of the actor, constantly delivering lines based on cues we didn't write. To master the gap is to reclaim your sovereignty. When the negative event happens, the automatic response of the actor is to recoil, defend, or attack. But the witness part of you that occupies the gap can observe this impulse without following it. You can feel the sudden heat of irritation or the cold spike of anxiety and simply say, here is the irritation. In that moment of observation, you are not the irritation. You are the witness of it. And in that gap, you are finally free. This is the most fundamental human power. The power of choice. When you are in the gap, you are not defined by your conditioning. You are defined by the possibility of your next action. You are not defined by the devil voice in your head. You are defined by your ability to notice the voice and choose not to obey it. You move from the reactive, survival-based mind into the creative, presence-based mind. This is the architecture of stillness in action. It is the practice of protecting the quiet so that the quiet can protect you. You can start this by identifying your own trigger points, those moments in your day when you feel the most likely to lose your center. For many, it is the morning rush, the inbox, the commute, or the way a specific person speaks to them. Instead of trying to avoid these moments, use them as your laboratory. When you feel the familiar click of tension, use it as a trigger to stop. Drop your shoulders away from your ears. Unclench your jaw. Take one conscious, deep breath into the belly. In that one breath, you are breaking the chain of conditioned reactivity. You are teaching your nervous system that it is not in an emergency. You are moving from a state of being triggered into a state of being present. You will fail at this, of course. You will react. You will snap. You will be carried away by the current of your habits. That is not a sign of failure. It is simply the nature of the training. When you catch yourself having reacted, don't waste time on self-flagellation. Just notice it. See the pattern. Smile at the realization that you are awake and resolve to stay in the gap a little longer the next time. This is the training of a lifetime. It is how you turn your life into a work of art, consciously crafted from moment to moment, rather than a frantic performance dictated by old scripts. You are no longer the actor playing a part. You are the director standing in the wings, deciding which scenes to play and which ones to cut. This is the beauty of the gap. It is the point of entry into a life that is truly deeply your own. It is where you find the freedom to be different than you were a moment ago, and it is always, always available. You are standing in the gap right now, between the end of this sentence and the beginning of your next thought. How will you use it? Part IV. Dancing with the shadows. To be a complete human being, one must learn to dance with the shadow. We are taught from childhood to cultivate the light, the socially acceptable, polished and pleasant aspects of our personality, and to banish the dark to the basement of our psyche. We push away our anger, our envy, our ambition, our pettiness, and our existential dread, hoping they will atrophy in the silence of our repression. But the shadow is not a static collection of rejected parts. It is an active, energetic force. When disowned, it gathers strength in the dark, eventually leaking out to project itself onto others. We see our own buried aggression in the rude behavior of a colleague. We see our own hidden greed in the ruthless actions of a competitor. We perceive the world not as it is, but as we are. And because we refuse to acknowledge the ugly parts of ourselves, We are forced to battle them in the external world. We become obsessed with fixing other people, never realizing that the antagonist in our life is merely a mirror reflecting our own unreconciled depths. The breakthrough alchemical turn is realizing that every spike of judgment you feel toward another is actually a map leading back to your own shadow. Instead of attacking the villain in your life, you are invited to turn the gaze inward. What is it in me that is being triggered by this person? What part of myself have I abandoned? And why does seeing it in them cause me such discomfort? This is the alchemy of conflict. You take the lead of your judgment and you transmute it into the gold of self-awareness. When you find yourself in the grip of a conflict, notice the actor who wants to defend, justify, and win. Notice the desperation of that persona. It is terrified of being wrong because it believes its existence depends on being right. But you, the witness, the one who inhabits the pair not under threat. You can afford to be curious. Try this. The next time you are in the middle of a heated argument, intentionally shift your focus into the body. Feel the heat of the emotion. Notice the urge to interrupt, the urge to win, the urge to prove the other person bad. Do not act on these urges. Simply sit with them. You are observing the shadow, not feeding it. By holding the conflict in the space of your awareness, you fundamentally change the dynamic. You stop being a combatant in a war of wills, and you become a container for the friction. Dancing with your shadow means acknowledging that you are capable of the same traits you find so repulsive in others. You are not above the petty, the greedy, or the angry. You are human, and the entire spectrum of human experience resides within you. The difference between you and the person you judge is merely the degree to which you have integrated that knowledge. When you stop fighting your own darkness, you stop being afraid of it. You become a person who can hold their own complexity without flinching. The monk learned that to make peace with the world, he first had to make peace with his own darkness. He learned to thank the people who triggered him, for they were the ones who finally held up the mirror he needed to see his own disowned parts. This is not about becoming a doormat or letting people treat you poorly. It is about becoming an immovable object that doesn't need to strike back. You can set firm boundaries and speak your truth, but you can do so without the poison of malice. You can be fierce without being vengeful. You can be clear without being cruel. When you integrate the shadow, you lose the need to project your fears onto the world. You stop needing to win because you are no longer fighting for the validation of your own ego. You start to see that conflict is just another form of weather, a loud, turbulent, uncomfortable storm that is passing through the vast sky of your existence. You can stand in the middle of that storm and remain dry. You can hold your ground, breathe through the friction, and come out the other side with your integrity intact and your heart still open. That is the dance. That is the architecture of a person who is no longer living in the shadow of their own projections, but in the light of their own. Integrated truth. Part V. Living as a verb. Life is not a noun, it is a process, a constant state of unfolding. When we treat life as a noun, as a trophy to be won, a status to be maintained, or a museum piece to be displayed, we become static and brittle. We fear change because change threatens the integrity of the trophy. We fear the passage of time because we think it is eroding our value. But when we treat life as a verb, we embrace the flow. We understand that the me of this moment is not the me of the next. We are a river that is constantly renewing itself, shedding the debris of the past to make way for the freshness of the present. To live as a verb is to shift the center of gravity from the outcome to the engagement. Most of us spend our lives obsessed with the what will I achieve? What will people think? What will I have at the end of the day? But the secret to a life of depth is to be fascinated by the act of living, the nuance of the breath, the texture of the effort, regardless of the results. It is the dancer who dances not because they want to finish the dance and receive the applause, but because they love the sensation of the movement, the way the music moves through their limbs, and the sheer, fleeting beauty of the gesture. When you live as a verb, you lose the paralyzing fear of failure. How can a river fail to reach the sea? It is moving, it is flowing, and that is its purpose. When you see your own growth as a dynamic process, you stop labeling your setbacks as evidence of your inadequacy. You see them as the necessary bends in the river. You see them as the friction that reveals the strength of your own character. You realize that success and failure are just labels. The mind applies to events that are, in reality, just neutral movements in the flow. This is the ultimate antidote to our performance-obsessed culture. We live in a world that wants to grade us, to categorize us, and to put us in boxes. But you are uncategorizable. You are a shifting, unfolding, ever-expanding expression of consciousness. You cannot be graded, because there is no final exam. There is only the opportunity to wake up to the next moment, to learn the next lesson, and to participate in the next movement of the song. Living as a verb also changes the way we interact with others. We stop viewing people as objects to be managed or obstacles to be overcome, and we start viewing them as fellow participants in the flow. We begin to see the verb in them the way they, too, are unfolding, struggling, and becoming. This opens the door to a radical kind of empathy. You no longer demand that others stay the same just to satisfy your need for stability. You allow them to be dynamic, just as you are allowing yourself to be. This way of living requires a courageous surrender. You must be willing to let go of the rigid identity you have built. You must be willing to be a different person tomorrow than you were today. It is a terrifying prospect for the ego, which wants to be a solid, unchanging, recognizable monument. But for the soul, it is the only way to be free. The soul doesn't want a monument, it wants to dance. So move, work, love, create, engage. But do not hold your identity with a white-knuckled grip. Treat your life like a garden you are tending, not a fortress you are defending. A garden is always changing, always growing, always dying, and being reborn. It is a verb in the most beautiful sense. When you become that garden, you will find that you no longer need to seek completeness. You are the blooming, the wilting, and the seeds waiting for the next rain. You are the process, and in that, you are perfectly, entirely enough. Part V, the architecture of intention. If you are not the one writing the script of your life, the world will write it for you. This is why the architecture of intention is so vital. Your intention is your lighthouse. It is the beam of light that cuts through the fog of your daily habits, the noise of social expectations, and the frantic distractions of the modern marketplace. It is not about controlling the outcome, a task that remains forever beyond your reach, but about calibrating your inner frequency so that you are consistently showing up as the person you intend to be, regardless of what the world throws at you. Intention is the profound difference between reaction and response. A reaction is unconscious, reflexive, and driven by your historical conditioning. It is the knee-jerk mechanism that wants to defend, attack, or retreat. A response, however, is conscious, deliberate, and rooted in your intention. When you enter a high-stakes conversation, your reactive mind wants to win, to prove, to conquer, or to hide. But your intentional mind can choose to listen, to understand, to bridge, or to remain calm. Which one do you want to lead your life? The daily practice of setting an intention, not just as an abstract thought, but as a commitment to a specific quality of being, is a revolutionary act. It is the act of claiming your own agency. It is the declaration that you are no longer a passenger in your own life, buffeted by the winds of other people's needs and emergencies. You are the pilot, and even if the wind blows you off course, you have the lighthouse to guide you back. You have the anchor to hold you steady in the center of the storm. This practice requires constant, gentle recalibration. You will forget your intentions. You will get swept away by the current of your own habits, your own stress, and the sheer momentum of the day. This is not a failure, it is a feature of the training. The moment you realize you have drifted, the moment you wake up and see you are no longer acting from your intention, that is the moment of your return. That realization is the victory. That is the moment you step back into the gap and resume your post as the director of your own experience. Your intentions should be human-sized and soul-aligned. Do not set intentions that are rigid or perfectionistic, as these only create new forms of self-judgment. Instead, set intentions that bring you closer to the person you are actually becoming. Today I will be a person who listens before speaking. Today I will be a person who pauses before reacting. Today I will be a person who holds the space for others. These are not goals you achieve. They are qualities you embody. They are the seeds you plant in the garden of your daily life. By setting an intention, you are essentially preloading your nervous system with a map. You are telling your brain what to prioritize. If your intention is patience, you are far more likely to notice the gap when you are sitting in traffic or dealing with a difficult client. You are far more likely to feel the tension rising and choose to breathe instead of explode. The intention acts as a silent background process that monitors your behavior, providing a subtle guiding hand whenever you veer off course. This is the alchemy of focus. You are training your attention to inhabit the qualities you value most, proving to yourself that your internal state is not dictated by the world, but is a creative act you perform every single day. You stop being a consumer of experiences and start being a co-creator of your reality. You stop waiting for the world to make you calm, and you start bringing the calm into the world. And in that shift from passive recipient to intentional creator, you will find a satisfaction that no external achievement could ever provide. You are finally building a life not based on the frantic search for more, but on the deliberate, meaningful expression of what you already are. Part V, the radical act of listening. In a world that screams for attention, the most revolutionary thing you can do is listen. And yet listening is a dying art. We have become a culture of waiting to speak. We listen to others only long enough to formulate our rebuttal, our advice, or our own competing story. We are not listening to understand, we are listening to position ourselves, to validate our own viewpoints, or to find the fastest route to the end of the conversation. We treat listening as a passive waiting period, but it is actually a form of deep, active presence. To listen radically, you must first create a vacuum of silence within yourself. You have to be willing to set aside your own agenda, your own defense mechanisms, and your own desire to be the expert in the conversation. You have to be willing to be empty, so that the other person can fill the space with their truth. When you listen to someone without the intent to fix them, interrupt them, or judge them, you provide them with a sanctuary. You allow them to feel heard, and being truly heard is often the catalyst for the very healing they were struggling to find. When you are listening to someone, try to notice the actor inside you, the part of you that is mentally writing your response while they are still speaking. Gently, consciously set that actor aside. Return your focus to the sound of their voice, the cadence of their breath, and the vulnerability in their eyes. This level of listening is a gift. It is one of the highest forms of love you can offer another human being. It says, I value your existence more than I value the sound of my own voice. But listening to others is only half of the architecture. The other half is listening to yourself. We spend so much time telling ourselves stories about who we are and what we need that we have forgotten how to hear the still, small voice of our own intuition. This voice doesn't arrive as a loud command. It arrives as a nudge, a sensation, a quiet pull toward or away from something. It is the wisdom of your nervous system, the integration of your experiences, and the truth of your being to hear it. You must practice radical listening in your own life. Stop the internal comment for a moment. Stop the debate. Ask yourself. Question: what do I really need right now? And then wait. Don't immediately answer with the smart thing or the responsible thing. Just listen to the silence that follows the question. The answer may be surprising. It may be inconvenient. It may contradict the plan you have so carefully laid out, but it will be honest. When you listen deeply to yourself, you stop living against the grain of your own soul. You stop forcing yourself into boxes that don't fit. You start to align your actions with your internal reality. This is the foundation of authenticity. You are building a life based on resonance rather than effort. When you listen to others with presence, and to yourself with curiosity, you stop moving through the world like a battering ram and start moving through it like a river. You start to find the path of least resistance, not because you are lazy, but because you are finally in tune with the terrain of your own truth. The next time you are in a conversation, challenge yourself to be the last one to speak. Let the silence hang for a moment after they finish. Let their words settle. You will be amazed at what emerges in that extra space. You will hear not just what they said, but what they meant. And in that deeper understanding, you will find a connection that is far more durable than any agreement you could have engineered. Listening is the bridge between two separate islands of consciousness. It is the act that proves we are not alone, and it begins with the humble, radical choice to be quiet, to be present, and to hear part. The architecture of forgiveness. Forgiveness is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in the human experience. We often think it means condoning the behavior of those who have hurt us, or that it is a gift we grant to someone else to absolve them of their sins. We withhold it as a form of currency, waiting for the other party to apologize or change before we release our grip on the resentment. But the true nature of forgiveness is much more internal and surgical. It is not a gift you give to someone else, it is an act of liberation you perform on yourself. When you hold on to resentment, you are drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. You are carrying the weight of the past into every room you enter, allowing a ghost from a previous chapter to dictate the quality of your present-day relationships. Resentment is a form of psychic clutter tab in your browser that never closes, consistently draining your battery and slowing down your system. Forgiveness is the act of deleting the file. It is the recognition that the past is a finished story, and that keeping it alive in your memory does not change what happened. It only ensures that the injury continues to occur in the present. To forgive is not to say that what happened was okay. It is to say, I am no longer willing to allow this event to define my future. It is the act of reclaiming the energy you have been wasting on hatred, regret, or the desire for revenge, and reinvesting it in your own growth. Whenever the memory of a betrayal or an injustice rises to the surface, the practice is not to feed it with rumination. Instead, you acknowledge the injury, you feel the sting of it. You honor the hurt you experienced, and then you consciously choose to drop it. You visualize the memory as a heavy stone you have been carrying, and you simply open your hand. You can begin this practice by identifying the unpaid debts you are still carrying. Are you waiting for an apology that will never come? Are you waiting for someone to acknowledge the pain they caused you? When you tie your freedom to the behavior of someone else, you are making yourself a prisoner of their limitations. Forgiveness is the ultimate boundary. It is the statement that you have extracted all the learning you can from the experience, and you are now finished with it. You are cutting the cord. If you struggle to forgive, start with the most difficult person. Yourself. We often harbor more resentment toward our own past selves for the mistakes we made, the opportunities we squandered, the times we were weak than we do toward any external enemy. We treat our past self as if they were a stranger who betrayed us. But your past self was doing the best they could with the information and the tools they had at the time. They were operating from a place of fear, or ignorance, or pain, just as you are now. When you forgive your past self, you are finally integrating the fragmented pieces of your history. You are becoming a whole person again, rather than a person haunted by the ghosts of their own previous iterations. This is the alchemy of release. When you forgive, the landscape of your mind suddenly becomes much more spacious. The energy that was tied up in the defensive crouch of resentment is suddenly free. You have more capacity for joy, more bandwidth for presence, and more courage to engage with the world as it is, rather than as you fear it might become. Forgiveness is not a on-time event, it is a discipline. It is a muscle that strengthens with every act of letting go. Every time you refuse to be drawn into the narrative of your own grievance, you are exercising your freedom. You are choosing to be a person who is defined by their future potential, not their past injuries. You are walking out of the prison of your own mind, and you are finally free to begin the rest of your life. This is the structural integrity of a liberated soul that no longer carries the burden of yesterday, but moves forward with the lightness of true, unencumbered being. Part X. The architecture of joy. We are conditioned to believe that joy is a prize, is something we stumble upon when the stars align, when the promotion arrives, or when the perfect partner appears. We treat joy as an external phenomenon, something that happens to us, a fleeting reward for successful navigation of the world. But this view is fundamentally flawed. Joy is not an event, it is a discipline of attention. It is the natural temperature of the human heart when it is not being frozen by the expectations of the ego. In the midst of the most difficult seasons of life, the monk realized that joy was the only thing that could break the cycle of his own self-judgment. It wasn't that his circumstances changed, the isolation was still harsh, the memories still painful, but he began to notice that joy was always present in the periphery, waiting for an invitation. Gratitude is that invitation. We often make the mistake of thinking that we should be grateful after we have received something good. But this is backward. Gratitude is not a response to a positive outcome. It is a lens through which you view reality. When you practice gratitude, you are actively training your brain to scan for the beauty, the grace, and the small, quiet miracles that exist in every single moment. This is the geometry of joy. It exists in the space between the expectation and the reality. When you expect nothing, everything you receive becomes a gift. When you expect everything, everything feels like a disappointment. To cultivate the architecture of joy, you must start with the micro-gratitudes. Stop looking for the epic. Look for the way the morning light catches the dust in the air. Look for the way your body breathes without you having to ask it to. Look for the kindness of a stranger, the reliability of the floor beneath your feet, the simple fact that you have the capacity to read these words. This is not a form of toxic positivity. It is not about ignoring the difficulties of your life or papering over your pain with empty platitudes. It is about holding the reality of your suffering alongside the reality of your blessings. You can be in pain and still be grateful for the sunset. You can be grieving and still appreciate the taste of water. This dual awareness is the hallmark of a mature, integrated soul. The practice is simple. Every night, before you close your eyes, anchor your awareness in 3 things that occurred during the day that you are thankful for. Not the big things, the promotion, the vacation, but the small, transient, easily missed things. The smell of rain, the sound of a laugh, the feeling of safety in your own bed. By doing this, you are teaching your nervous system to prioritize the positive. You are effectively rewiring your brain to see the abundance that is already present in your life. You are shifting your internal baseline from a state of deficit to a state of sufficiency. Joy is the natural state of a consciousness that is no longer preoccupied with the need to be more. When you realize that you are already enough, and that the world is already filled with enough, joy ceases to be a luxury and becomes your baseline. This joy is not the manic, high-energy excitement that burns out quickly. It is a quiet, steady, sturdy presence. It is the joy of being. It is the joy of participating. It is the joy of knowing that, no matter what happens, you have the capacity to find something beautiful in the wreckage. As you cultivate this gratitude, you will find that the world begins to change around you. You stop seeing a world that is doing things to you, and you start seeing a world that is inviting you in. You stop being a consumer of experiences and start being a co-creator of beauty. You are no longer chasing the sunshine, you are becoming the light. And in that shift, you discover that the joy you were looking for was never a destination. It was the very frequency of the life you were already living. Part X, the architecture of service. For years, the monk lived in the sanctuary of his retreat, honing his awareness, dissolving his attachments, and mastering the internal landscape of his own mind. He had traveled as far as a person could go into the interior, seeking the roots of his own freedom. Yet he eventually reached a pivotal realization. The final test of his liberation was not how well he could sit in silence, but how well he could return to the noise. There is a tradition in many wisdom paths often called the return to the marketplace. It is the profound realization that wisdom serves no purpose if it is kept in a vacuum. The point of your practice and meditation, the self-compassion, the boundaries, the forgiveness is not to make you a better person in isolation. It is to make you a more capable, more present, and more effective participant in the collective life of humanity. Service is the natural byproduct of an awakened mind. When you stop being consumed by the devil voice in your head, when you stop being a prisoner of your own insecurities and your own endless hunger for more, you naturally become aware of the needs of others. The energy you once spent on the theater of your own ego becomes available to the world. Service does not have to mean a grand, heroic sacrifice. It does not mean you have to quit your job, sell your belongings, or become a saint. Service is found in the way you interact with the person sitting across from you. It is found in the quality of your attention. When you show up to a meeting as a fully present human being, having done the work to center yourself, having practiced the art of radical listening, and having cultivated the patience of the gap, you are performing an act of service. You are introducing a knuckle of calm into a chaotic environment. You are becoming a stabilizing presence for those around you. The monk realized that the most powerful thing he could offer the world was not a set of instructions, but an example of what it looked like to be home. People are hungry for presence. In a world of fragmented, distracted, anxious individuals, a person who is truly deeply and unconditionally here is a beacon. To serve is to offer your presence as a refuge. When you are listening to someone, you are saying, "I am here and you are not alone." When you handle a conflict with integrity and grace, you are saying there is a different way to be in the world. When you act with kindness, you are saying you are seen and you are valued. You are a cell in the larger body of humanity. When you heal your own suffering, you are literally lowering the aggregate amount of pain in the system. When you practice presence, you are making it easier for others to be present. You are part of an invisible, silent network of people who are choosing awareness over unconsciousness and kindness over violence. The architecture of your life is not a private matter, it is a social one. Every internal choice you make creates an external ripple. Every time you choose to breathe in the gap, you are changing the atmosphere of the room you are in. Every time you choose compassion over judgment, you are shifting the culture of your workplace, your family, and your community. As you integrate this into your daily life, do not overthink your contribution. You do not need to calculate your impact. Just show up. Bring your whole, messy, beautiful, awakened self to the table. Offer your listening. Offer your patience. Offer your integrity. The monk eventually returned to the world not as a teacher, but as a student of the marketplace. He worked, he struggled, he engaged, and he failed, just like everyone else. But he did so with a heart that had found its rest. He had discovered that the refuge he was looking for was not a place but a way of being that was expansive enough to hold the beauty and the suffering of the world and still remain at peace. You are not arriving at a finish line. You are arriving at the beginning of your life as a contributor. You are finally ready to take the wisdom you have found in the silence and translate it into the language of action. You are ready to be the presence that the world is so desperately waiting for. You are ready to serve. Sparchi, the architecture of legacy being the sky for others. As you walk through the marketplace of your own life, you may begin to wonder, what remains? If we are all just weather patterns moving through the vast, empty sky of consciousness, what are we actually building? What is the legacy of a person who has stopped striving for the temporary more? The monk's final lesson, the one that truly closed the circle, was the realization that the greatest legacy is not what you leave behind in monuments or records, but what you are while you are here. Legacy is not a stone monument, it is the quality of your resonance. Every interaction you have, every choice you make to be kind when it would be easier to be indifferent, every time you hold space for someone who is struggling, these are the vibrations you leave in the world. You are building an architecture of impact that exists not in mortar and brick, but in the hearts and nervous systems of everyone you encounter. When you have done the work of coming home to yourself, your presence becomes a silent permission slip for others to do the same. By being a person who can sit with their own discomfort, you teach others that it is safe to be human. By being a person who listens without judgment, you teach others that they are worthy of being heard. By being a person who forgives, you teach others that the chain of resentment can be broken. You are the sky for those around you. When the people in your life are caught in the thunderstorms of their own ego, their own anxiety, and their own search for more, you can be the vast, spacious, calm environment that contains their weather. You do not need to fix them. You do not need to change them. You only need to remain present and steady. This is the most powerful form of service. You are not imposing your wisdom. You are embodying it. You are showing that peace is possible, even in the middle of the mess. And that, more than any lecture or advice, is what actually changes the world. As you look forward to the rest of your life, let go of the need to calculate your legacy. Let go of the need to leave a mark that is visible to the masses. The most meaningful marks are the ones that are invisible. The gentle shift in a child's confidence, the healing of a broken relationship, the steadying of a friend's heart in a moment of crisis. You are building a legacy of awareness. Every moment you spend awake is a victory against the unconscious drift of the modern world. Every moment you spend choosing presence is a contribution to the sanity of the whole. You are already whole. you are already free, and the work of your life is simply to live from that truth, one breath at a time. The monastery was a place of preparation, but the world is the place of practice. The silence was the teacher, but the noise is the test. So go back to your desk, back to your relationships, back to your daily tasks. But do not go back the same. Go back as the witness, go back as the sky, go back as the person who knows that, no matter what happens, no matter what storms arise in the foreground of your experience, the vast, luminous space of your own consciousness remains untouched, unshakable, and eternally at home. The journey you began when you started this exploration is not a journey to a destination. It is a journey of homecoming. You have been everywhere, searching for what was already yours. You have been everything. Trying to become what you already are now, you can finally stop. You can sit down, take a deep, full breath, and recognize that everything you have been looking for, the peace, the wholeness, the freedom has been here, in the quiet, spacious, and eternal present, waiting for you to come home. Welcome back. Welcome to the life you were always meant to live. Welcome to yourself. Part C, the architecture of memory, restoring the past. Memory is not a library of objective facts, it is a creative workshop. We mistakenly believe that our past is a fixed monument, a stone pillar that supports the house of our present. But memory is fluid, highly susceptible to the mood, the needs, and the filters of the current moment. When you are in a state of scarcity, your memory pulls up every time you have failed or been rejected. When you are in a state of expansion, the same memory bank provides you with examples of resilience and triumph. The monk discovered that he was the curator of his own museum. He had been spending decades dusting off the artifacts of his pain, polishing them until they looked more real than his present experience. He realized that restoring is not about lying to oneself. It is about choosing which narrative to highlight. We are all haunted by the ghosts of our past mistakes. But these ghosts only have the power we give them through constant revisitation. To restore is to approach the past with the perspective of the witness. You look at your younger self, the one who made the mistake, not with the harsh eyes of a judge, but with the compassionate eyes of a mentor. You see the context, you see the fear, you see the limitation. You realize that you were a different person then, navigating a map that was incomplete. By changing the narrative, you change the emotional weight the memory carries. The stone in your hand loses its density. It becomes a pebble, and then it becomes dust. This is the architecture of memory. You are building a history that serves your growth, rather than one that shackles your potential. You aren't deleting the past, you are integrating it into a narrative of profound transformation. Part: the architecture of desire aligning with the natural flow. Desire is the engine of the universe. It is the force that pulls the seed toward the light and the tides toward the moon. We have been taught to see desire as the enemy, something to be extinguished through asceticism or moral restraint. But desire is not the problem. The problem is the grasping that follows the desire. The monk realized that the hunger for more was a distortion of the natural hunger for expansion. Expansion is the nature of life. It is the way of the universe to express its infinite complexity. When you desire, you are participating in that expression. The distortion occurs when you believe that the attainment of the object of your desire is the only way you will ever be complete. This makes your desire a hostage-taking event. You hold your own peace hostage until the object is achieved. The architecture of desire is based on the principle of non-grasping. You can desire the promotion, the connection, or the creative breakthrough, but you hold it loosely. You pursue it with excellence, with passion, and with strategy. But you do not allow your internal state to be contingent upon it. You are in essence enjoying the ride while you are moving toward the destination. You are satisfied with the current, while remaining eager for the sea. This is a subtle, high-level skill. It requires you to know what you want, but not to need it for your survival. When you remove the desperate edge, you actually become more effective. You think more clearly, you are more charismatic, you are more resilient. You move from the energy of the beggar to the energy of the creator. Part: the architecture of solitude, the laboratory of the self. We live in a world that fears solitude. We have made ourselves always on, tethered by the digital umbilical cords of our devices, terrified of a moment where we are left alone with the sound of our own mind. But solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is the state of being starved for connection. Solitude is the state of being full of oneself. The monk's retreat was a laboratory of solitude. He found that in the absence of the other person to impress, the person to argue with, the person to define himself against, the ego began to starve. It had no material to work with. It could no longer perform. And when the performance stopped, the actor dropped his mask. Solitude is the architecture of the self. It is in the quiet, empty spaces that you finally hear the true frequency of your own being. It is where you face the boredom, the anxiety, and the existential dread that you usually drown out with busyness. But if you sit with these feelings, you eventually reach the bedrock. Below the noise, below the roles, below the masks, there is a core of stillness that is absolutely unshakable. You don't need a mountain retreat to find this. You can build this architecture into your day. You can find pockets of solitude, a walk without music, a morning cup of coffee without the phone, a commute where you simply sit with your thoughts. Use these pockets to audit your inner state. Are you present? Are you at home? Are you the sky? The more you cultivate this, the less you will need the validation of the world to feel solid. You will become a person who can stand alone, and in that standing, you will become a person who can truly stand with others. Part XV. The architecture of failure falling upward. Failure is the greatest teacher of the human experience, provided we have the architecture to process it. In our current culture, failure is treated as a verdict on our worth. We are taught that if we fail, we are a failure. But in the architecture of the awakened mind, failure is simply information. It is the data point that tells you your strategy was off, not that your value was insufficient. To fail upward is to treat the mistake as a necessary step in the iteration of your own existence. You analyze the collapse, you extract the wisdom, and you use it to reinforce the foundation. The monk, in his return to the marketplace, failed many times. He lost money. He damaged relationships. He made choices that led to disaster. But he stopped looking at these events as tragedies. He looked at them as field testing. He realized that the only way to find the limits of his own capacity was to push until he snapped. When you snap, you learn where the structural weakness is. You repair it. You come back stronger. This is the architecture of resilience. It turns your life into a continuous improvement project where the final version of you is never really finished, but is constantly being refined by the reality of your engagement. Don't fear the breakdown. The breakdown is often the breakthrough in disguise. It is the ego realizing it cannot control the outcome, and the witness stepping in to manage the aftermath. If you have failed recently, celebrate it. You have just been given a masterclass in how reality works. You have been humbled, which is the most powerful starting point for any significant growth. You are now ready to build something that actually lasts. Epilogue. The architecture of the horizon. You have reached the final pages of this internal journey, yet there is no conclusion. There is no final period that closes the book on who you are. This is the beauty of the architecture we have explored. It is a structure designed to be open to the sky. If you feel a sense of lightness, that is the weight of the actor persona finally being set down. If you feel a flicker of fear, that is simply the ego realizing that it is no longer in control. Both are natural. Both are valid. You are in the process of becoming the author of your own experience, and that is a craft that unfolds until your very last breath. The monk did not leave behind a set of commandments. He left behind a way of being. He did not ask his students to follow him. He asked them to follow the trail of their own breath, to navigate the geography of their own hearts, and to find the ground beneath their own feet. As you conclude this reading, you are not leaving the monastery. You are taking it with you. You are carrying the silence into the city. You are carrying the sanctuary into the boardrooms, the living rooms, and the quiet, lonely moments of the night. You are the architecture of your own peace. Do not worry if you forget. Do not worry if you fall back into the old patterns of the browser tabs and the frantic search for more. The beauty of this path is that it is infinitely forgiving. Every time you realize you have wandered is a new beginning. Every time you return to the breath is a coronation of your own awareness. You have everything you need. You have the gap where you can choose. You have the witness who is never broken. You have the compassion which is the fuel for your journey. You have the mundane, which is the laboratory for your awakening. The horizon is not a line you reach, it is a direction you walk. Keep walking, keep breathing, keep being the sky. The story is yours now. The script is blank, the stage is set, and for the first time in your life, you are not performing for anyone else. You are simply living, truly and deeply, in the quiet, spacious, and eternal reality of now. Go forth and inhabit your life. Everything you have been looking for, the peace, the wholeness, the freedom's been here all along, waiting for you to realize that you have already arrived. You are the listener, the voice, the seeker, and the discovery. Welcome home.